Hello and welcome to Force for Thought, the show brought to you by the folks who like to watch their heroes get manipulated into committing atrocities, dumped, sliced in half, and burned by the people he trusts most in the galaxy. I'm Luke.
I'm Max.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Force for Thought. Hello there. Kenobi premiered its first 2 episodes on May 27th, 2022, and here we are 1 year later to look back at it. So, we have a lot to say, and I just want to get right into it. What were your first impressions? We all rewatched it in the last week or so. What were your first impressions on rewatch, and has anything changed for you since your first watch?
I think a lot changed for me. I think initially I was one of the most excited I've ever been for a show, I think. You guys were at Celebration when it premiered, correct? Because I remember texting you guys, and I was staying up late to watch it. And dropped like an hour early, I believe. And I remember being so excited. But yeah, it was a little different for me watching it the second time. That's all I'll say for now. Maxwell.
It's interesting. I feel like it didn't change at all for me. I feel like when I first watched it, I judged it at kind of the same level I have it at right now. The only big difference was obviously we were waiting week to week to watch the next episode, and I was surprised by how quickly it actually went by when I did rewatch it. When we proposed this idea, I was like thinking my head of my schedule and when I'm going to find, small increments of time to be able to fit it in. And it turned out to be surprisingly easy. They went down smooth, and I feel like when you watch them all back to back, it kind of amplifies the experience because you don't have that pain of waiting a whole other week and letting those questions kind of linger in your mind.
But also love that week of waiting and questioning.
It's a love-hate relationship.
I loved when it came out. I liked the release, like we talked about. 2 episodes was great out of 6, but then also being able to watch it back to back again is a very different experience.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Max. I didn't have many different feelings my second time watching it through as I did my first. I love the show. I'll give it a quick out of 10 and then a Star Wars out of 10 for me. I don't know if you guys want to go on that same scale or just want to do it out of 10 once, but as a TV show out of 10,
this feels like an ending to an episode.
As a TV show out of 10, I give it a 9. As a Star Wars show, I give it an 8. So really, really high.
Yeah, that's pretty high up there.
That is pretty high.
I didn't think too much about what I would rank it as out of 10. I would probably give it a 7.
I did because of IMDb, and I'm an addict with ranking things and rating things. I think out of Star Wars as well, I'd give it an 8. 8, which is kind of, again, it is hard to distinguish nostalgia and Star Wars versus whatever. And like there is part of me that is like that snooty filmmaker liking stuff, not me as a filmmaker, but like liking films and stuff. But then there's the other part of me that is like a full nerd, and so I think with that I'm just gonna stick to my 8. Where like for example, I would give Andor a 9 and Book of Boba Fett like a 6.5 to 7 if I can give 0.5s.
Okay. What are the overall strengths and weaknesses of the show, do you think?
Where to dive in?
Yeah, let's go with you. Let's start with strengths.
Let's start with strengths. Yes, not start on the negatives. I think overall, again, I guess I'm more aligned with you guys on rewatching it. The biggest difference, I guess, was just having that experience of watching it in one full go versus waiting a literal week for the next episode. Overall, I think very keynotes. I can dive in a little bit deeper, but I think this is a show that does fan service correctly. I think there's a lot of nostalgia tied to it with the characters that we're seeing, and I think it does it really well. I think it pays off a lot of fan service in not a total obvious way. I mean, obviously, hello there. Everybody was waiting for that moment. I don't want to get too.
But they did it in the perfect way.
But they did, and it felt like a payoff versus like instantly starting there. And it's like, well,
my experience with that was a little different because for some reason I didn't see it coming. I just saw him walk up to there, and like in that moment,
you didn't see it coming when he was walking up slowly. That blows my mind.
The only thing I could think of was like, oh man, this is the first time that he's ever meeting Luke Skywalker. Like that's crazy. Like I never thought of it, and I was like thinking to A New Hope, and when Luke says like, I wonder if he means old Ben Kenobi. So I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like he definitely knows of him. They would have met at some point, and I was like, this is the first interaction. That's so crazy. And then he said hello there, and I was like, oh my god, of course it was.
I think just really quick top level notes as well. I think it does action scenes really well. I think the acting is fantastic. I think I don't understand the flack for the CG or the scenery whatsoever. I think they're able to show a lot of cool stuff on a TV budget, which was amazing. For not a little known fact, but a little fact out there too is that each episode cost $25 million, which is significantly more than Mandalorian, for example. And I think I don't think it looked any better or necessarily worse, but I was confused why people said it looked bad. And then I also think the music is fantastic. John Williams only scored the intro, the main Obi-Wan Kenobi theme song, and I think that is one of the best themes of recent years. But I think the rest of the soundtrack is fantastic, and I also think that it is a predictable but very fun ride to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Those are top level notes of why it's good.
I'll jump into my strengths. I agree with you on a lot of stuff. I
Thank you.
think Kenobi's character arc, obviously, like that's just saying I like the show as a whole, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. The lore surrounding Leia and the Hidden Path, I thought was great. I'm a lore junkie. I love when they introduce new stuff, especially in an era that we know so well that we've always been kind of wondering, like, what are all these characters doing? Like, there's no rebellion for so long. Like, where are the good people in the galaxy? And I love seeing that.
Hidden Path was super cool, I thought.
And the name drop of Quinlan Voss.
Yes, and
Yep, that was super cool.
Ned B is the other strength that I want to bring up. I loved Ned B, how he was silent and how actions speak louder than words, and that was I mean, it was on the nose, but it needed to be on the nose, and it was perfect.
Yeah, because up until Ned B, correct me if you can think of another example, but just about every droid was either like the comic relief, like, oh, he'll say like a funny quip here, or they'll just have like the beeps that are always kind of like cute and adorable, right? So Ned B was like the first one to really break that mold of just being like the completely silent, stoic character who was a hero. He shielded Tala so that she could close them in and blow them up, and it was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was good.
Max, what do you got for strengths?
I got a lot. I like Kenobi quite a bit. First, it's the overall story between Obi-Wan and Vader, I think really worked well. I like it a lot, from Obi-Wan's moment realizing that Anakin is alive to his duel, in which, you know, they have that final confrontation, and he says, you know, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did. I love that moment, and it's such a satisfying ending to their stories, where they are now, but knowing where they're going to be in the future as well, right? Because the question that everyone had going into it was, well, how are they going to confront each other and rematch? Because we saw how they ended on Revenge of the Sith, and we saw how they get back together on the Death Star in A New Hope, and everyone's headcanon was that they didn't interact in between there, because we had no reason to believe that they did. But I feel like they added that in there so well. And again, going back to what Matt said about like incorporating fan service but not being too over the top, I absolutely love that moment after Obi-Wan and Vader's duel when Obi-Wan walks away and he just kind of quietly calls him Darth under his breath.
Yeah.
I love that moment. I think that's so funny because like people always kind of wonder like why does Obi-Wan call him Darth in A New Hope? Like there's multiple Darths, you know, like that's just kind of like a weird thing.
Yeah, it's his accepting that Anakin is gone.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Not to get, I want you to continue, but I don't understand why one of the biggest complaints people had was that he just left him damaged and broken. And I feel like it made sense for his.
It's his MO.
His character. Yeah, literally. Okay, sorry, go back. Go on. That's really funny, Luke.
I mean, it does call into a question, I think, a lot of like the Jedi beliefs, right? Because I think the easy answer to that is just saying like, well, he's a Jedi. That's what they do, right? Like they don't really kill someone like. What happened?
So he did it twice. I'm still laughing at what Luke said.
Oh,
Yes, I'm
that
sorry.
was his MO, just leaving him to suffer.
Sorry.
Well, the first time he thought he was gonna die, I don't know. It's interesting.
It was a real yeah.
But no,
Save the cat moment.
I think the story, the overall story between Obi-Wan and Vader really worked. I really liked it a lot. Obi-Wan's personal arc was awesome, concluding with him finally re-accepting you know, the fact that he is a Jedi and that he can't just kind of shut it out, and having that result with Qui-Gon finally reveal himself and saying like, I was always here, you just weren't ready to see me. I really like that a lot. Vader's arc being blinded by revenge, resulting in a little scolding from Papa Palpatine. Obi-Wan and Leia together. I really like their duo. I like them a lot. I thought, I don't know the actress's name who plays the young Princess Leia, but I thought she did a really good job. I really like the scene where they are on the Frick's transport, and he's giving her the backstory about her mother, and yeah, that's a beautiful moment that could bring a tear to my eye. Vader and Reva's duel. I think that's probably very high up there on my list of best Star Wars duels.
God,
Vader,
there's so many amazing moments in this series,
and it's so perfect too. I mean, Vader he throws her aside like a ragdoll without ever igniting his own lightsaber.
Yeah,
I mean, he just sidesteps all of her attacks, and then eventually strips her own lightsaber, does that thing where he disconnects them and then just uses her own lightsaber against her, and it's awesome. And I could keep going about all the strengths, but the other one that I want to highlight is Order 66. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm just like a masochist, but I feel like I could watch Order 66 from a million points of view a million times and always be happy with
It's
it.
such a massive event in Star Wars that, like, how can you not see the entire galaxy basically go through the same thing simultaneously? There's a million different stories. So yeah, I 1000% agree. Again, from a masochist. Oh my god. You want to say a Max's perspective?
I'll say that there are a lot of obvious beats that the show has to make because we know where Obi-Wan starts and we know where he ends.
Yeah.
But, obviously it's the journey that makes the show. And there are so many points that I'm like, of course that had to happen. And there are so many of like, I can't believe this is happening. And I was shocked that I had the exact same experience 1 year later on my rewatch. Like when Obi-Wan is burning on Mapuzo and Vader's just dragging him through the coals.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening. And then I was rewatching it again last week and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Such
that's
an amazing
that's a good
moment.
scene. Yeah.
What's your structure like? 'Cause I didn't read the thing. I want to see if I want to go off on a tangent and start from like.
No,
F1.
go ahead. We're just going to talk about weaknesses next.
Oh,
But-
okay. Before we drop it, I have a lot more positives as well to get into, but I also like. What did you guys think of the intro? Because I kind of forgot they gave like a 4.5 minute recap of like the whole trilogy of Obi-Wan, basically.
Oh, yeah. And you see a lot of prequel stuff. That's exciting.
They
I
kinda
liked it.
lead up to it, and it's like I know some people are like, oh, they saved you the time from watching those movies, but it's like, no, I think that sets it up really great, and also, does that nostalgia work up front so the show can kind of live on its own. And I think Kenobi being cut off from the Force is something that is really cool, and it's something that like that is obviously a theme kind of within this like Disney era. A little bit same thing with Luke Skywalker. He just cuts himself off, and I think that's like something that you can do, and I think it's rightfully so that he does that, and he doesn't use it until the second episode where he catches Leia when she falls off the building, and I think it's a great moment because it's like all I want to see is Obi-Wan be really cool and ignite his lightsaber and be the badass like we know he is. But I think being able to like kind of build that pressure, build that tension, and then finally have that release of him like saving somebody is a great moment, and it is like a great payoff.
And I really like when he's in Fortress Inquisitorius on Nur, when he is kind of starting to get back into the groove of it, and like you can like see that in the choreography, like he like adds like an extra like lightsaber twirl in there. And I remember every time I see it, I always catch it, and I'm always like, oh, there it is. He's kind of getting his swagger back.
This show does a tremendous job of storytelling through lightsaber combat and other combat in general, which a lot of other Star Wars kind of throws by the wayside, but this show is great at that.
When Leia is being held hostage in the lair and the lights go off, and all of a sudden the saber ignites, and it gets that one stormtrooper, and it goes off,
That's a
and
cool
it goes back up.
Yeah.
It's one of the coolest moments in the show. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, the visuals
love
of
it.
that scene is really cool. I do like that moment a lot.
All right, so there's a lot that there is to like, but what were some weaknesses you guys wanted to bring up?
I had some downsides. I think I don't understand the hate for Reva. I don't understand really the hate for the show. But with that being said, I think it does have some problems, right? Like with anything. I think the writing is another problem. Same thing with kind of like Mandalorian a little bit, where sometimes I feel like, and it wasn't even the dialogue to me, where Mandalorian suffers with dialogue, I think Kenobi suffered with some scenes. I think they, like you said, Luke, they wanted to get from point A to point B. And I think they had that in mind more so than what made sense for the scenes to fill that time. And so sometimes
Do you have an example?
well, for example, I know I hate to bring this scene up even, but like when he's smuggling Leia out from the jacket,
You don't like that?
it's fine. But I didn't like. I think you said this last year when you're like the beard is the bigger giveaway,
Yes.
and so like I've always thought about
Imperials do not have beards,
No.
and Obi-Wan does.
that, and that's fine, right? But it's like
And not a well-kept one.
No,
but, like,
shaggy and long.
honestly, but like think about it, right? He's put in that situation, and it is kind of like a dumb thing, right? It's like I understand that, and that doesn't really bother me. But you could have just rewrote it to be anywhere else. They didn't need to leave through that main hangar bay either. So I think one of those things is just like, oh, they need to confront Reva somehow. How do they get there? And it's like, oh, well, you can make it whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
And so I think they're kind of making things for themselves, and where like they want to get point A to point B, and then they rewrote it. And we also know, right? They ditched the scripts originally written because they were too bleak, right? So part of me is wondering if they try to salvage it, and then they kind of did some rewrite and some punch ups, and so that's why we get some sort of unevenness in the writing a little bit from time to time.
I did not know that, but I agree. It is outrageously bleak at times, like the Obi-Wan burning scene, or like another moment that makes me drop my jaws when that guy is getting, his wages stolen by the guy that Obi-Wan is working for, packaging the meat on Tatooine, and he says to Obi-Wan, "You got a problem," or something, and Obi-Wan just puts his head down and walks away.
I feel like it was probably a lot more of that. And then two other really quick things is I think sometimes Leia feels more like a plot device than an actual character. And I feel like it's like, oh, Obi-Wan has to go to this person and this person and save her. Where honestly, I liked her as an actress. I think she did a great job, and I don't understand the hate for that either. But I think what would have been almost better is if we see her in episode 1, she gets captured. We see her then in episode 4, and she's a prisoner, and then he finally saves her in episode 6. Versus her being the character we have to go throughout. Because it is just hard when you have a kid that young. And then you just toe the line of what we know and what can be. And when you toe the line, I think, of what we know, it gets dicey. And it recontextualizes some things. But the fact that she had so much FaceTime with Kenobi can come into question, I think, when they meet in A New Hope and stuff. So just say they just met in episode 6 and then he saved her and then they leave would be good. With that being said, I do like their relationship and I do like what he says to her.
I feel like they wrapped that up very well, though. I don't have any problem with.
I think so too, but I think it's one of those things again where I think they wanted to cram it in as much as possible, where I think Leia could have been served better by being a little more underutilized, to be honest. And I think the other biggest thing for me is that this is movie material. I don't think this needed to be 6 episodes. I enjoyed watching it on a week-to-week basis, but I think some of the things feel a little thinner, like the writing, like those scenes, and I feel like when you stretch it over a course of 6 movies or 6 episodes, things can get a little thin and can get a little uneven. I think this is perfect movie material to be a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, and you can have those side characters come back and they feel like they're not useless. Like, I remember we were thinking O'Shea Jackson Jr. was going to be Kalen Voss, and then it's revealed that he's not, and it's like, oh yeah, they're not even doing anything with him. And by the way, he's only going to be in like an episode or so.
Yes, Roken was my number one weakness.
Yeah, and
I was very disappointed with
that's
him.
the thing.
Why?
Well, I think,
Because what was he there for? He just like vehemently opposes Obi-Wan joining the path, and then nothing happens, and then he's like, "All right, General, how can I help?" And it's like,
and then you
why are you here if you're not gonna stick to your convictions or offer any sort of opposition or any development for anyone else?
A relatively known actor.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing. So if you do a movie, things are very tight. Every scene needs to be in there for a reason versus some filler, right? You can still introduce all of this interesting these things. Obviously, now we're a year later, and they're just now announcing 3 movies. So obviously, there's some tension there. They didn't want to do a movie. They wanted to see how their the TV space would work out for them. So that was my biggest gripes. It's basically just the writing. I think Leia felt like a plot device from time to time. And then I also feel like it could have been a movie versus a miniseries. Or a show, depending.
I think that is all fair. Very fair.
Yeah, I think the 6-episode TV series was kind of like a weird middle ground. You're right. They either should have shortened it up to just be a movie, or spend more time with the writing and like flesh out some of these stories a little bit more. Like what you were saying with Roken. I didn't have any issues with Roken other than what you pointed out, which was that one line, but I think that's just bad writing.
But it's one of his only lines.
No, it's not one of his only lines, but we'll talk about that in a second.
I just want to be clear. I said that's all very fair. That's mostly very fair. I disagree with you a good deal about your opinions on Leia. I thought they treated her very well.
My only thing was in a landscape of presumed 8 episodes, to make sure that like toning it down to 6 is kind of a clear sign that should have been a movie, I think, or expanded.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think it would have been better served as a movie.
Right.
I agree that some of the writing and some of the delivery was pretty lackluster. Unfortunately for me, I feel like 90% of it was with Reva specifically.
Yeah,
my
you're a Reva hater.
My big weakness.
I got some notes on that too.
Was Reva? Yeah, from
the rewatch,
from the writing of her to the delivery, like there was just so many weird things. Like a lot of her dialogue was just overly expositive. It wasn't natural. The directing of her style was weird. Like they had her like, and the biggest example I'll probably bring up a lot was her interrogation of Leia. Like I feel like that was just such a mishandled scene in there because like there was such a good opportunity for Reva to be like a really like a conniving, like manipulative interrogator and like get inside Leia's mind or something, and instead it just resorted to her just like basically pounding on the table saying, "Tell me where they are." And it's like, she's a 10-year-old girl. Like I think there's a better way of getting this information out of her right now. But I think that just kind of comes down to like the writing a lot, and some of the directing went like I feel like she was shouting a lot, and it's weird when a villain has to shout because I feel like it's a weakness. And that's why like overall as a villain, she didn't really work for me. Like I never really cared much for her when she was on the screen or anything like that.
Which bouncing off of that really quick, because one of my Reva notes was like those scenes I 1000% agree, and I feel like the root of the problem is not her as an actor or anything. It's just the idea of a villain being inherently angry is a bad place to start. Kylo Ren is inherently angry, but we get so much backstory with him. We get so much time to spend with him, and I feel like with Kenobi drives the story forward, and we get hints of Reva if it allows us to. If she's interacting with Kenobi or Leia, versus in the sequel trilogy, we get to spend time with Kylo Ren by himself, which we rarely do with Reva, which means we have to understand her off the gate, which is why she is just yelling all the time. And I feel
why
like
all of her dialogue is just very expositive
exactly,
and unnatural.
And then that's my problem is that they decide to shoehorn in this whole thing with Vader. And it's like that's super interesting, but it's like that would have been a great reveal within a 3-movie arc if she's the one we're following.
So that's and
Sorry,
that was
on.
the other part of my critique for Reva's character too, was that her backstory was kind of convoluted. She wanted revenge on Vader because she knew that it was Anakin and that Anakin killed her Jedi family, so now she hunts down other Jedi to get close to Anakin so that she can kill him, basically doing exactly what he did, but ultimately realizing it in the end, right? When she went to go kill Luke, she did see herself in him, and she finally realized like, oh wait, if I do this, then I am Vader. And it's like, okay, good, you got there, but like this seems like something that you should have like realized a long time ago.
Going to Luke too,
but you
though.
can also like write it off, right? Like in my head, like I'm like, okay, well she was blinded by rage, she was consumed by the dark side, but there's still like that little bit of mental gymnastics that you kind of have to do to get there.
Which you shouldn't have to. And then why did she go for Luke? Like that was the biggest thing. Was just like
just for revenge.
I know, but like it's not clearly stated or even easy to understand. You're like, wait, what? Like I understand that Kenobi has a connection to that, but it's like I know she heard that transmission, but like. I just don't.
So it's a personal pet peeve of mine when people just like kind of critique something or say like, oh, I didn't like this was stupid, this was bad, without offering anything up for like a better way of how it should have been handled.
Yeah.
So if you will entertain me for a second, I think the way they should have handled Reva was to just make her a bad guy, just hate in her heart.
I agree.
I'm kind of done with
redemption.
The redemption stories, not just necessarily in Star Wars, but in
life.
like it's very common, in pop culture in general. Fast X just came out. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm assuming that Jason Momoa joins the crew by the end of the movie. The last Marvel movie I saw was Quantumania, and even like MODOK had a weird redemption arc that didn't make sense. Like it's in everything I see, I feel like, and I'm done with it. Like I just want to see like a good bad guy, and I feel like Reva could have been just a genuinely power hungry Inquisitor who just wants power and wanted to kill the Grand Inquisitor so that she could be the Grand Inquisitor, and then when she finally achieved that rank, had her sights set on being Palpatine's right-hand man and chief enforcer, and then that's why she wanted to go after Vader, like basically just all out over a power
love
trip.
that, yeah.
And it doesn't have to change. That what I just said too changes nothing about the story or how it plays out, other than you would then have a confrontation between Obi-Wan and Reva where he would have to stop her. But I also feel like that's something that was missing from the show. She never had any sort of confrontation with Kenobi.
And then no mental gymnastics. I'm so sorry, Luke. I feel like you're consistently going to say something. So
yes,
no mental
I
gymnastics.
have been on the verge of saying something brilliant
please,
for the last 10 minutes.
All right, do it.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I did not find a problem with Reva on my first watch or my rewatch, but a lot of what you're saying I'm agreeing with, and I think the best term is unnatural. So much of it is unnatural, and they're right on the precipice of a great story with Reva what you just said, if they had her connect more to Kenobi, because she goes through her final character arc off screen, basically. Like she tries to kill Luke, and it's unnatural because Luke can't see the lightsaber for canonical reasons, and then she just doesn't kill him, and then Kenobi shows up, and there could have been a great moment where, Obi-Wan failed Anakin, and Anakin became the very thing he swore to destroy, and then Obi-Wan basically says that Reva did not become the very thing she swore to destroy, but they just kind of like fumbled the ending at the 1-yard line, and they were so close to having it be a redemption point for Kenobi and for Reva, and they didn't kill Reva, which is very rare in Star Wars to have a redemption story and have them not die. So there's a lot of great story opportunity in the future that I would love to see her in coming up, but
I agree with that. Given everything that I just said about Reva, I would not mind seeing her again.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What we were talking about a couple weeks ago is that I feel like this is a perfect opportunity not to kill a character. Star Wars is being smart, and they're saving her. With that being said, I hope they actually pay her off and actually go forward with it. Like, I'm glad Disney is sticking with Rey and like being able to actually stick to their guns and doing something that they think that is correct. And I think that like when they did this, what they did Solo, they obviously gave up because there was multi-millions of dollars being made. But like I still hope they pay that off at some point, right?
I hope so,
like
too.
all those characters are so cool, and I think Reva's the same thing. Is like you can't just leave her open-ended, and then like in 15 years when the fandom accepts her, then they do a random spin-off. It's like,
Yeah.
no, let's use her now. Like
Right.
you set it up, stick to your guns, and do it.
So I do have a lot of thoughts about where they go from this, but before we do, I want to bring up the only other weakness that I have with the show,
Yes.
which is that some of the coolest moments we already saw in other media.
Yeah.
For the first one being Fortress Inquisitorius, Obi-Wan sneaking in to save his friend and then having to sneak out. That was literally like the ending to Jedi Survivor.
And not
I
as
feel like
cool.
it
Jedi
happens-
Fallen Order.
Yes,
Fallen Order,
the
excuse
first
me.
one,
Yes,
yeah.
Fallen Order, and it was so cool in the video game, and so it was literally the exact same. Although I do appreciate that they did like pay close detail to what Fortress Inquisitorius looks like, because it looked like it was straight out of the video game, and I really like that.
That's true.
I thought
I like it when
Mustafar
they
was
maintain
great. Everything was so cool. I think set design wise, which is why I'm so confused.
Yeah, we did get to
Most
see a
things
lot
were
of
cool
Vader's
set
castle.
design. That was one of my weaknesses. Was Mapuzo was
Yeah.
very
Blah.
bad
It was
in my mind.
It was
Like,
an alleyway, and then
yeah, it was just it looked like the foothills of Los Angeles. Like
It
it was a
was,
desert,
yeah.
but not really. It was just it looked so like somewhere I've been 1,000
Yes.
times, which is the opposite of what I look for in Star Wars. And there's been so many, like you see Coruscant and it's amazing, and
Yes.
Dayu is new and amazing,
Yeah.
and Alderaan the first time we see that and it's amazing,
Yeah.
and
I think-
Mapuzo was just such a fumble.
on Mapuzo, it's really cool to see. One of my favorite scenes in the whole show is when, which is not really a surprise, is when Kenobi senses Vader for the first time. When he's walking through the alleyway and he kills that guy. It's so eerie. Like, the sound cuts out. It's super creepy. I feel like we've all kind of had that. Maybe it's that feeling when you're playing hide and seek and you can see the person coming to find you, and you're like, oh, like I'm hiding. But it's like it brings back that feeling, and I think that really, I don't know, I really love that scene, and obviously the Vader.
And because of the
Kenobi.
I mean, just
Fight.
wearing a mask makes it scarier too, because
Yeah.
you're like, does he see him? I don't know, and you never
Yeah.
you can't see the expressions on his face, so it just makes him so much scarier. Like when they're on Mapuzo and they're dragging Obi-Wan out of the fire and they're running away with him, and you just like stay on Vader
You
for
know
a good
he's watching.
second, yeah, but you have no idea what he's thinking,
Nope.
and it's terrifying.
Mhm.
Did you also like him in the back of the tank, Kenobi?
Oh yeah,
It just mirrors Vader a little bit, and it's like, that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Same
Like-
thing with Vader in the back of the tank too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
watching him like get his arms screwed on and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything like that. I was like, yep,
I
I like watching that.
loved when Kenobi like says Anakin, and it cuts to that sound, and then you see him.
Yeah,
The
at
very,
end of
the
episode
very end of
2,
the second
I
episode.
think
Yeah,
that is an amazing moment.
that was yeah.
It's so cool.
Before we move on,
Yes.
Actually,
my
hold on.
weaknesses I
Sorry,
never
the
got
only
to.
the
Oh, okay.
only other thing I was gonna say too was the helmet slash.
Yes.
When
oh
I said
yeah.
when I
because
said
it's
the
from
best
Rebels.
moments we've already
Mhm.
seen, that was literally in Rebels. And again, I watched this scene of Vader's rematch with Obi-Wan a bunch, and it doesn't take me out of it. Like, I don't hate the scene for that, but it is kind of cheapened by the fact that it was already done.
Yeah, I just feel like they could have done something different. With that being said, you see Hayden Christensen's face. I love the voice work on there where it bounces
And the
between.
colors that they use, yeah.
I love it. It's so cool. But yeah, I agree. It's just like, that's a little odd. That there are multiple moments that are just kind of rehashes of things, which, yeah, I don't know.
I agree, and that's how I feel too. Like, it doesn't bother me. I still love it, but if I'm just thinking about it, it's a little odd.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
But the other weaknesses I wanted to bring up, number one is the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
I thought I was so excited to see him, and then looking back at the series as a whole, it seems like Deborah Chow or whomever wrote the series, and Reva was the Grand Inquisitor or whatever, and then they brought it to Disney Lucasfilm, and they're like, actually, the Grand Inquisitor is the Grand Inquisitor, and they're like, oh, okay, put him in the beginning, and then he's dead, kind of, and then he can come back at the end, and he's not dead.
Yeah.
Like I feel like they were very tied canonically, and they didn't handle it perfectly.
The same thing where if it was a movie, you could have had Reva and the Grand Inquisitor be side by side the entire time. And then by the end of it, she kills him, and then it's like, oh my god, that's crazy. And then, or then he comes back or whatever. You realize he's not dead. Or Kenobi could have been like Andor, just say 12 episodes total. Because it feels like we are set up with him, but how much more interesting would it be if we end the season with Reva killing the Grand Inquisitor, and then we're left for a year to wonder, and then in the beginning of season 2, they bring up so much stuff.
I disagree with that just because
Really?
when Kenobi was coming out, I was so annoyed by all the flack that it was getting every single week after every single
Same.
episode. People saying like, "Oh, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense."
'Cause
And every
he's-
time I
he's
just have to
back,
keep telling
yeah.
people, "Why don't you just wait until the end of the show?"
No, I agree.
I'm
No.
sure they will address it. And if you just gave people that much time to stew over it,
Oh, people would hate it?
yeah.
That's true. I guess that's true. I just mean like story. I know. I guess Grand Inquisitor might be a bad example for the fact that he honestly canonically he has to be alive or in it, and that was super annoying to see that full week. And then like 2 episodes later, he was like, "Oh yeah, it's like what we all said. He's got 2 stomachs or whatever." Like, whatever nonsense. But I feel like just like building that story up though, even to make it more satisfying to have him be in it a little more, because he is so cool. And I also don't mind his design. Like I know people are like, "Oh, they could have done this." The same thing with Cad Bane, and they could have done this and that. But it's like whatever worked practically. Like who am I to say? Like,
Yeah, I don't hate the design, but I think the character was not the best.
Yeah.
So the thing with the Grand Inquisitor, when I was watching it the first time, you do kind of have those questions in the back of your mind. And I will say that I'm very proud of myself because I was always the person to say, like, let's just wait to see how this plays out first before we critique it.
That
But
you
in the
were.
back of your mind, you do have that question, right? Like, why did they just kill him
Yeah.
off right there? Like, I know he has to come back. And then when he does come back, you just kind of like throw your hands in the air and you're like, there you go, finally.
Yeah.
Like, are you happy now? Like, we told you to just wait.
Yeah.
You got what you wanted. There's your answer.
I think that's the problem sometimes with like the fandom in general. It's like those reveals aren't fun anymore because people have beaten them to death over 7 days only. And you're like, oh my God.
People are
And
just impatient. Had this been
Yeah.
a movie, like you said, into a tight like 2 hours or something,
Yeah.
then it would have been like, oh, okay.
I also think one of my biggest things with the show that I guess negative wise that feels more natural to bring up now is that it is a show that that relies a lot on reveals. I think with Leia, I think with like even like Jimmy Smits when he's in Kenobi's cave and it's like, oh my God, who is that guy? And he takes his hood off and it's Bail Organa.
I remember the
think-
first time watching that, you have like those butterflies in your stomach, and you're like, oh, who could it be?
Yes.
And then it's Baylor, you're like, okay.
Oh,
that
yes,
makes
exactly.
sense.
And so I think rewatching it, a lot of those moments are like, I know who it is. Get on with it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I feel like when you rewatch the original trilogy, there's not like those big anticipated reveals, and that's like the only. I guess that's not like fan service, but it's like I don't know. Those moments I think are a little bit wasted. You're getting 20-second reveals consistently that are like, all right,
Yeah.
you know. With that being said, something I brought up a couple weeks ago, Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers did not take me out of it as a bad guy because he just always looks like a bad guy.
As a bad guy, he didn't take me out of it, but that sequence certainly did with them chasing Leia through the woods.
It
that
did.
That was a little
But
hard.
I love
was-
the
that was
setup
silly.
when he's like, I'm just waiting here. And then she's like, oh, what are you waiting for? He's like, for you. I was like, oh, that's a creepy line.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
and
then anything that preceded that was, a little goofy.
kind of like what Luke said about how like you got to the 1 yard line, but then you just fumbled it. I feel like that's the case with Flea.
Yeah.
He is such a weird looking person.
Yeah.
Why did you keep him as a human? Slap some makeup on him. Make him an alien. The guy already looks like he's an alien.
The same reason they did this. Well, that's what they did with Thundercat and Boba Fett. You're just like, he's got like his
who?
normal dreads. He's the artist bassist guy. He was the guy who was working on. Who was he working on?
Fennec Shan.
He was one
Yeah,
of
he
the
was
mods.
working on Fennec Shan.
No, he was the one who made the mods. He was the modifier, I
Yes,
guess.
the modifier.
That guy.
But like that again, semi took me out of it, but like Flea for some reason didn't. But yeah, I think but that's another great scene is the chase scene that feels like she needs to get captured. Let's make a fun chase scene. And where it's like you could have just wrote it different. Like Flea could have said that creepy line and then all of a sudden 2 goons could have came out and attacked her, right? So we don't need to know Leia is super badass. We know she is already. We've seen it. You know what I mean? Or maybe she's not yet and she can grow into it. Also, her using her friend in the beginning
Lola.
is great because that's like a great
Oh,
little Padme.
yeah.
I feel like
the
callback.
Handmaiden.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It felt really reminiscent of that, which was cool. Which I didn't really catch
Yeah,
on the
that's
second,
that's
the
a
first
really
time.
cool. That's a great moment. I agree.
Right?
I remember the first time I saw that, I had that split second of like, what the? And then she was like, where's Leia? And I'm like, oh, okay. That's not Leia. We're good.
The last weakness I'm going to bring up, and that'll lead us right into season 2 predictions and hopes, is regrettably Qui-Gon is one of
Yeah.
my favorite characters in Star Wars,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
I was so excited for him to be in this show. I had my Black Series Qui-Gon toy with me every episode, waiting to open it up the first time he came on screen, and they saved him for a little more than a cameo at the very end. Now, if they do a season 2,
Yeah.
Qui-Gon has great potential, and it can be some of the best stuff for me personally. So it'll probably be my favorite Star Wars stuff ever if they have Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon like delving into the Force and what it means to serve the light and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that, but I wanted it in season 1, and we really didn't get it. And I did open my Black Series toy at the end of episode 6, but it just felt a little hollow by then because
Yeah.
I wanted it so badly sooner.
So, again, going back to like offering up like differences, that they could have done with that, I feel like it would have made more sense for Qui-Gon to come to Obi-Wan when he was buried under that rubble during his battle
Yes.
with Darth Vader, because I feel like the show had ended so nicely, and then like as he was kind of riding into the sunset and Qui-Gon shows up, it was like a weird moment where I'm like, oh yeah, this has to happen real quick, because like they hinted at it very obviously, like from episode 1, like you knew Qui-Gon was going to come back as a Force ghost. It's just a matter of when, and then like to have it like tacked on to like such the end, it felt like a weird, like the first time I saw it, that was my reaction. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that this has to happen.
I feel the same way about Lupita Nyong'o, who plays Maz Kanata in The Last Jedi. I feel like they have her on the payroll. They made the whole movie and forgot her, and they're like, oh crap, they'll call her here in the middle.
Yeah.
All right.
Why can't you come help him? Yeah, there's a trade dispute.
Yeah, union dispute. They don't want to hear about it. Move on. Just shoot it.
Yeah. I feel like
The writer's taking notes. Don't want to talk about it. Okay, I can work with that.
I don't think Liam Neeson wanted to be in it though. That was his biggest
Why
thing.
not? Yes, he did. He's in the Clone Wars.
I don't believe a single actor anymore when they say like, "Oh, I'm done with this. I'm done with that." It's like you'll come back.
But if the price
if they
is right,
really want you, you'll come back.
which is why it cost $25 million to get Hugh McGregor back probably per episode. But I
Yeah.
feel like I agree. I feel like why wouldn't he come back? Liam Neeson has become a generic action star. And it's like, yeah, everyone loves Qui-Gon Jinn. And I feel like it makes so much sense. With that being said, I feel like they did include him at the very end as a hope for a season 2. Because I feel like the filmmakers, Deborah Chow, I feel like Ewan McGregor, all genuinely really love Obi-Wan as a character and also the story. So I feel like including Qui-Gon Jinn at the very end as a little tag opens up to questions versus if you include it in episode, earlier in the episode, it's like, that was awesome. And then how do we end this? Where I think including Qui-Gon is like, oh, season 2 will be in it. So I 1000% agree. It makes sense to have Obi-Wan and the Qui-Gon Jinn together in a prequel era-esque, those actors and stuff together.
Yes, and there are rumors, however substantiated is up for debate, but George Lucas's treatment for episode 7, 8, 9 when he sold Disney was going to be about like the inner mechanics of the Force and like going and like investigating the midichlorians and like going to the microscopic world of the midichlorians and like really delving into what the Force is. And
Really doubling down.
I know, but I think that they could do something, maybe not so intense, but something like that with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and just like really delve into the Force. And those are the two characters that make the most sense to do it. Both actors are here for it. I think they could write something really great for it.
Go to the midichlorian realm. Midichlorian.
I mean, Qui-Gon is basically there in the Clone Wars. He's I mean, don't quote me because it's obviously not exactly what he's doing, but yada, 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 the Cosmic Force. Qui-Gon leads Qui-Gon leads Yoda to the Force Nexus and teaches him all kinds of stuff. Like, let's see that in live action with Obi-Wan.
There were a couple moments where I feel like they definitely left something in there for future stories to be told. Like how they left off with Roken when he said, I forget what the quote was, but Obi-Wan told Roken something along the lines of like, hey, you're doing a good job or something. And he was like, oh, we're just getting started.
Yes,
And like that was like the last thing Roken said. And I'm like, okay, well, and it's a relatively famous actor. So I'm like, all right, we'll expect to see him again. Same thing with the conversation that Obi-Wan has with Leia when he mentions, I think I had a brother. Like, that wasn't a throwaway line.
That is a line.
Yes, it was.
No,
it's not a throwaway line because it's a substantial moment for their story together about found family and about accepting your past and moving on to your future with.
But you don't think they're going to revisit that?
Luke.
No, I don't.
In a series
think
full
they
of
will.
brothers and sisters and sons and daughters.
Everyone's related to someone.
Yes.
It's about the whole series is about Leia's found family, and Obi-Wan wants to tell her more about her father and mother, and Leia says, "No, it's okay. I know my family." And even though she got these qualities, she's passionate and forthright, and also caring and discerning, and she carries these traits from her birth parents. But it's about her new family.
So real quick,
Same with Obi-Wan.
I think Obi-Wan Kenobi is still technically considered a limited series.
Yeah.
Do you think and do you want a season 2, Luke?
Yes. I want one. I don't think we'll get one.
Matt?
Well, let me change that because
Who's coming in hot?
I said this for years about the Obi-Wan series to start with, like 6 years ago when it was just a rumor.
Yeah.
Every year that we don't get it, Ewan McGregor is aging like a fine wine. He can do this when he's 80, and it makes just as much sense as now. So I think we will get one. It might be decades from now, and I'm okay with that. I would rather they do it while Liam Neeson's still alive. He is older, so the clock is kind of ticking in that regard. But I do think we'll get one eventually, but it might be a very long time.
I hope Liam Neeson is a
Matt, what
huge
about
fan
you?
of this podcast and just stop listening.
Turns it off. I'm gonna live forever.
Yeah, show those guys. Real quick, I think season 2 would be really funny to follow Obi-Wan's brother, and it'd be like the equivalent of watching a Jim Belushi movie versus a John Belushi movie.
Who are you? I'm Ron Kenobi.
Yeah, like Chris Farley's brother. You're like,
It'll-
I know you're
it'll be
funny,
like,
but you're not the same.
It'll be like Bad Company with Chris Rock, where his brother is a super famous spy,
His
and then they
identical twin.
his identical twin. Then they bring him in.
He keeps getting hunted like, I am not Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm his twin brother.
I promise you. No, I think the same thing. I would love one because I think there is more story to be told, and I think they can learn from their mistakes as well. And I don't think it would be necessarily as bleak. I'd be really interested in what they would do though. I'd be interested in seeing if you guys have any theories as well. But yeah, I agree with Luke. I think I want one, but I don't think we'll get one for a long time.
I got a lot of theories, so
Oh boy,
buckle
let me
up with
buckle
me
up.
for a second.
All right.
It's really just one specific theory.
Max is gonna pitch
Because
his 4 spin-offs about
this-
the Hidden Path, about Reva, about
that's exactly what I'm about to do. No more spoilers. Here we go.
This episode is just like all of us individually going on like very long rants. It's like 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes.
So I don't think that they're going to do a second season, and I don't think that they should. However, I think they very intentionally left a lot of doors open for future stories to be told in other movies, TV shows, whatever they want to do.
So no Kenobi.
I'm saying no to Kenobi. And here's why I say that. Obi-Wan's fate is very much intertwined with Anakin's. I
Yeah.
feel like you had to have Darth Vader in this Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and if they do another season of Obi-Wan Kenobi, you can't have Obi-Wan Kenobi without Anakin. But I also don't feel like, logistically, how do you bring back Vader? Because I don't want just every season to end with Obi-Wan and Vader fighting each other again with neither one of them winning.
Here's my question to you. Do you need it? What if it was, we always talk about Game of Thrones style. What if we followed Kenobi and we followed Vader separately? They don't have to intertwine.
Well,
I think
and that's
that would be
interesting.
weird.
What? Oh,
I
I'd
don't
love
know
to
if
see
that
it.
would
I disagree. I think you can do that. And here's my idea, my suggestion to Lucasfilm, if they want to take me up on it. This one's for free, guys.
What?
Use
you just
it.
give away millions of dollars.
I think you can. Set
No,
up,
it's not. As under the Force for Thought LLC.
I think the only way you could go forward with like a Kenobi season 2 type situation is if Vader is present but not physically, and you can do that by having some sort of proxy. So I think you could have Vader have some sort of secret apprentice. Maybe his name is Galen Merrick. Maybe he's played by Sam Witwer, and it's basically them bringing in Star Killer from the Force Unleashed video games into the current canon. A lot of fans love his character. They would be pumped to have him back. Sam Witwer, I know for a fact, would love to do it. I talked to him about this. And I think that would be a really fun way of doing it, where you can follow Kenobi, you can follow Vader, but their paths don't have to cross again, except for some sort of confrontations with this new secret apprentice, Galen Merrick, aka Star Killer.
Yeah.
So
I love that
I think
idea.
that's kind of.
Yeah, me too. That would be awesome.
I think that's how they can get away with it. I don't think they will, but I think that there is still a lot of other opportunities for future shows. The one that I really want to see is what I would call Knights of the Hidden Path. And it's exactly what Luke said. It's all of the Jedi that we know to this point have survived Order 66, work together to help rescue these Force-sensitive children from being hunted down in the galaxy. You would get a light side Reva. You would get Quinlan Voss. You would get Cal Kestis, who now knows about the path from the new Jedi Survivor
What's
game.
a saber looking like?
And we would have our question answered, baby. They'll tell us, and then when we go back and play the game, we'll say, okay, no, this is the color I'm using because that's
No
Cal
more
Kestis' lightsaber.
customizable.
And you would get who I think would be the founder of the path, somebody who was the first person to start rescuing younglings that we know of from Mandalorian Season 3, and that's Kelleran Beck. We can bring Kelleran Beck into his own TV show, help lead the Knights of the Hidden Path, and he can help save more younglings in the galaxy.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love that. And also that would work really well. Jedi Survivor, you didn't play it, but I did. They do go pretty deep into the Hidden Path lore and what it leads to potentially in the future, even after Kenobi. And I think it would be really well explored also as a video game or a comic even. Like I would be satisfied with a comic book about that.
Any medium.
I feel like it'd be cool to do I feel like what you're saying almost is like a trilogy of miniseries. So you get 6 episodes of Kenobi, and then you get 6 episodes of the path is the current throughout, and we can follow each of these characters through 6 episodes.
That'd be
makes
interesting.
sense.
Kind of like
Every 6 episodes, Vader shows up and slaughters another hero.
kind of like an anthology where they all eventually meet up.
Yeah, not even they don't have to meet up, but just like again, Kenobi kind of sets all these
I want
things
them to
up.
meet up.
Yeah, I mean, like yeah,
I want to
team
see a
up.
team of Jedi in this
Yeah, that'd be cool.
era of the height of the height of the Empire.
That sounds amazing. But we are running out of time. So final thoughts. Matt, go ahead.
2 quick things. I don't think that we have to mention the Kenobi stance that Ian McGregor finally did live action, which was fantastic.
Yep.
That was great. And then I think the other thing is, I think everyone always has been giving Vader flack for it sounds like he's a real person, that he leaves Reva alive. And I think that's like a kind of I feel like that's right up his alley, because I think there is good in him, and I think there is consistently, I don't know.
I think it speaks to his character that he thinks so little of her that she's not even worth his time killing. Like he embarrassed her and made her essentially nothing in his mind, and he could kill her, he could leave her alive,
and nothing.
She
No
could never
difference.
come back.
Nothing changed. He mentions that he knew what her plan was the entire time. Like he basically knew that she was just going to try to kill him, and that he had his eye on her the entire time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things that people complain about because it feels more like plot device to leave her alive.
Final thoughts for me. I'm just trying to think of something that I want to have said that we haven't talked about already. The Tamora Morrison cameo is fan service done right. That affected Kenobi as a
that
character.
Was great.
That was a good moment.
Yeah, the 501st Armor especially. And Wade, first sacrificial hero of the rebellion, coming in on the land speeder to save the day on Nur, and he gets killed, and he's the first fatality of the rebellion.
That's
and
true.
He got a lot of credit right when it came out, and he is immediately fallen out of everyone's mind. But Wade is a hero, and he shall not be forgotten on this podcast.
Last 2 quick things. So sorry to go back. Vader pulling down the ship. So cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Actually seeing that, because that feels like in any game, you want to see that in live action. They've never done it. And then also to see the Skyhopper that Kenobi gives Luke, that he is messing around with in A New Hope, is so cool to see him actually get that gift. It's such a small moment, but I really like that. It's like, and it's brand new, and then A New Hope, it's like very dirty and old. And the fact that he has that Skyhopper for that long is
Without
really
being
cool.
over the top about it, I feel like that was fan service done right.
It is.
I
It's
feel
such,
like
it's such a
Kenobi,
stupid minimal thing, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm still thinking about it
Kenobi was
until I
fan
forgot about it.
service
Now I
done
mentioned it later.
We haven't talked about Joel Edgerton either as Owen. He was there to play. He was
Owen
great.
was sassy.
right. And Beru was a badass.
Yeah, I missed
Yeah.
her haircut though from A New Hope, like a
gets
little mushroom.
Yeah.
Max, any final thoughts?
My final thought would be to encourage people to rewatch it again. I have this theory where people get too ahead of themselves. They get too into their head. They think about the canon, the timelines, and that it takes them out of enjoying the content. And I feel like once something is out there and you know what's coming, it's kind of easier to enjoy the highs. And I feel like there are so many highs with this TV show. It is so fun to watch. If you haven't rewatched it, I strongly encourage you to do so.
Yeah, I feel like there's a stigma, or at least just a reluctance to rewatch series as opposed to movies, which rightfully so. It takes 2 or 3 times longer. It's a much more of a commitment, but it's a shame because Kenobi did benefit from a rewatch in a lot of our minds, and I think it's a great show as well.
Yeah.
So before we leave, does anyone have any force for thought to leave us with?
I do. I think for this week's little force for thought is thinking back to seeing if there was a show, Star Wars or not, if there is something that you hopped too quick to conclusions about. From week to week, like Max is saying, and going back and trying to like revisit those, or just maybe thinking specifically for Kenobi or Star Wars to go back and maybe give it a little less harsh judgment. I think we've all kind of have done that in the past with things. I certainly have. So I'm trying to be better, trying to be more positive. That's why we led with positives and not the negatives.
Yeah, that's great. Introspection at its finest. So I will think about that and let you know next week. But let us know what you think. Have you rewatched Kenobi in the last year? Has it gotten better in your mind? Has it gotten worse? What do you think? Do you agree with us? Disagree? Let us know. You can reach out to all of us on social medias. I'm at Kit Fisto Blog on Twitter.
I am on Twitter as well at MaxterJedi.
You can find me at Filmowski.
And you can find all of us across the socials at Force for Thought. Until next time, thanks for listening.
See you, Sammy.